Really excited to talk to you. We're going to be covering some really fun topics regarding manufacturers and trying to measure that ROI for BIM Content Strategy. And so I just want to say thank you to everyone taking the time out of busy schedules to join us today. So today I'm joined by a great group of panelists, starting off with McDonald from Shen, Milsom, and Wilke design firm. SMW specializes in AV and security design, and Sean is the global BIM CAD manager for SMW. Thanks for joining us today, Sean.
Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Also with us today is Peter Lawrence. Peter is a business development consultant for Planar Systems Leonard, and Peter spent a large portion of his career bringing new products to market or launching products in new markets very successfully, and very happy to have you with us today, Peter. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Steve. Good to be here.
Wonderful. And then my colleague, Luke Johnson, who is also with us today, and Luke brings a unique perspective to the panel as he was in marketing with a product manufacturer in his previous life, which seems like a long time ago now, I bet, huh, Luke? Thanks for joining us, bud.
Thanks, Dave. Good to be here.
Yeah, and then myself, Steve Germano. So I work as a director here at Unify with various business development responsibilities. And all right, so let's get things going here. So for all the listeners on, please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A section of the WebEx. We'll be answering questions throughout the webinar, so please get your questions in. We'll try to answer them live as we can. If we don't get to any of your questions by the end of the webinar, we'll definitely follow up with you directly and try to get answers to you guys. And then also, this presentation is going to be recorded, and we will be sending a link to the recording to all registrants. So please feel free to share this with your colleagues and post it around the internet and all those fun things. All right, so kick things off. You know, as a building product manufacturer, there's just so many methods and strategies to market products to our target customers, and it becomes increasingly difficult to identify what avenues are actually producing results, what methods are producing product sales or increasing brand awareness or solidifying customer relationships. So Planar Leonard has an extensive product range, beginning with LED video walls, extending to other display categories, including LCD video walls, processing solutions, touch displays, transparent OLEDs, lots of really wonderful technology here produced by Planar. And so let's kind of explore some real-world examples looking at Planar and Leonard and kind of how they go to market, some of the different strategies that they utilize. And let's take a look at kind of what works and what doesn't work and get some feedback from Peter here. So Peter and the team at Planar, you know, like most companies, they deploy a myriad of marketing tactics. Everything from conducting AIA-accredited classes for their customers to quarterly email newsletters to distributing BIM models to providing powerful online configurator tools and design tools on their website, and we'll take a look at those. Those are wonderful. They have a multiple potential touch points with their customers, and all this effort to assist their customers in any way possible to drive more product sales, right? So, Peter, given the multitude of avenues that a company can pursue for product marketing, you only have so much budget, right? You can only spread yourself so thin and do so many different strategies. In your experience, which of these avenues have really proven to be more qualitative versus quantitative?
That's a good question, Steve. You know, I would separate that by saying that most of our digital avenues are quantitative. We can track and report. We have good metrics. We can set budgets, and we can see the change over time and all that sort of thing. So it's really easy to identify those as qualitative. But the quantitative stuff is really, well, it's very powerful for us. Anytime we can get in front of a potential client or a potential specifier, that's a really good thing. So we've had great results with our strategies where we are, you know, presenting at trade shows or teaching classes, AIA or CPS classes, or you know, doing any kind of continuing education, lunch and learns, and anytime we can look like the expert in our field, which we are and want to be perceived that way, we do that in a qualitative fashion. It's more face-to-face and more, you know, consultative, and that's those are the strategies that we push hard on. But the digital strategies we have to do as well, and they line up in many cases. And I think this webinar is a great example of how the qualitative and quantitative strategies line up here.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always fun to try to justify those expenses, right? It's like you may sit down with a customer and have a great touch point with them, and you may not find out until an actual purchase comes out of that for maybe 12 months later, right? These things take time. It is kind of those things where some things we can have direct tracking on, other things we can't. So we have to kind of take that multi-pronged approach. And one of the things that I really love about your strategy as a former specifier myself is the amount of different design tools that you offer the customers. And you know, I absolutely love this effort that you guys have put in here, because this is no trivial effort for the amount of digital touch points you guys have created from these LCD video wall kind of calculators, and even to the Mosaic designer, where you can kind of drag and drop and design your own Mosaic tile panels. You know, these types of utilities and tools, they really start to separate you from the competition, and I really love the effort you guys have put into this. Do you want to talk a little bit about this effort and these projects here? Kind of just curious, I guess, how large of an effort is this for a manufacturer? Is this a multi-year effort? What did this kind of look like for you guys?
Yeah, you know, it's no small effort, Steve. Thanks for recognizing that. We were very proud of those tools. You know, we're Planar. I mean, the trick is that we don't have a consumer brand like our giant global competitors, so we really have to do things differently. We have to do things better, and part of it also is because we don't have a consumer brand. A lot of specifiers are not familiar with us. You won't see displays, video walls, for example, that have our brand logo on it. So if we don't get in front of them early in the project life cycle, by the time we even find out there is a project, it might be too late. So we really need to get in there early in the project life cycle. And we have a focus group of architects and interior designers that kind of guide us to what their needs are. We listen very carefully to that. And so for several years, they've been telling us, you know, we need to be able to visualize this. I mean, we can hand them a spec sheet or a price, and that's fine. They need that, but that doesn't really give them a chance to, well, for the specifiers, it doesn't give them a chance to create a beautiful design and try to sell it to their clients. And for the clients, like, a spec sheet doesn't give any kind of emotional reaction, right? So if they can visualize it in a model or in a calculator tool or in some kind of mock-up, then they can get really emotionally attached to that, and it's much easier to make the deal work. It's easier for our specifiers to actually sell the design, and then it's easier for us to get in front of them early. So those tools are very large investments. We have a nonstop every year budget to add and improve those tools, and you know, our BIM strategy is one of many of such online visualization tools. So it's very, very critical to us. Our specifiers tell us they love them, and the end users use them as well. So it's something we're going to continue.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's so true about the emotional connection, being able to visualize things, right? I myself am a very visual learner, and when I can see and experience things like we're seeing here on the screen, some folks from SM&W actually walking through a space. This looks like an auditorium type of space here, and actually experiencing it. You know, these are the types of things that, you know, really help folks to connect with projects, help to set yourselves apart from the competition, and really help, you know, a design firm sell a design to a customer. And so with so many different avenues to explore and consider, you know, it's really interesting, Peter. So thanks for sharing that there. And so, Sean, I guess as a large-scale AV designer and specifier, and someone who would directly interact with some of these various marketing avenues that Peter was just describing, you know, which particular methods are really useful to you as a designer or specifier? Can you speak about what do you really need from the manufacturers, and how is it impacting your workflow?
So we can really, what helps us is anything that makes our job easier. We you know, we want to work fast, we want to work efficient, we want to be accurate. So you know, these tools fall into different categories. Things for visualization and early design are great helps to the designer, and as long as they can get the information to the designers, they can, you know, get invested in that system, understand how it works, know that it's going to work with the rest of the design, and really solve their problems. Those are really useful tools. On the other end, you know, being able to document the design and give that to the client in a way that they understand is really important as well. So we need to be able to put, you know, Rivet families into the model that are accurate and show the design. We need to be able to create invoice sheets and everything that work with the rest of the standards and guidelines that we have, so that we can deliver a package and not have to reformat and re-edit. So if your documentation and your tools need to work well within other systems, and that needs to be part of your process.
And so, talk to me a little bit about, is this an auditorium? Is this a stadium? What kind of project are we looking at here in the VR?
This particular project was a auditorium for a casino. It was a full theater, and when this particular model was looking at the AV design for that space.
Oh, so is that what you're doing here? It looks like you're kind of annotating or pointing out in the space different elements and highlighting those. What kind of different things are you using the VR for this particular project?
For that project, we were using it for a couple of things. One was as a sort of a visual confirmation and quality control check for the design, to make sure that what we were specifying would look appropriate in the space, and that this is coming straight out of our documentation model, that documentation model was accurate. So one of the things he's marking up here in this example is a spot where an outlet for audiovisual was in a wrong place, and it needed to be adjusted in the model to be accurate, and so it would show properly in the plans. We've also used this model with the client to show them what the space would look like, and how, you know, that you see the large speaker arrays at the top there, how they would look in the space.
Yeah, it's amazing. You know, about 5-6 years ago, I knew a handful of firms that were really pushing into VR, and now it's like a prerequisite that you have to be doing VR, especially if you're an architecture firm selling designs to customers. It seems like almost every one of our global architectural design firms are utilizing VR in different ways. So it's amazing to really see that these types of transitions in the industry and how quickly they're happening, and kind of one of those different things that requires now more that we have to ask from our manufacturers, as far as, hey, give us now models with textures, give us models that do look good now, because we are using them for visualization. So that's something we're hearing more and more of from the design firms globally as well. So thanks for sharing. That's great. All right, so I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Luke here, who's going to run us through this next section.
Great, thanks, Steve. So, yeah, so I guess, you know, as it relates to manufacturers who are undertaking a BIM strategy, there's kind of really no benefit from just having the BIM content. It has to be accessible on your own company website, through distribution channels like Unified Connect to maximize reach. You need people using the content. So, you know, as a primary objective, you want to develop content that makes it easier for designers and contractors who are going to be ultimately the users of the content to design and document your products, which ultimately really helps generate product specifications and sales. So as you can see on the screen there, you know, we did a survey last year, and, you know, according to the survey we did, 93% of design firms are using manufacturers' content, which is, you know, it's a really high number. But, you know, as manufacturers, it's important for you to know if your content specifically is being utilized, so you can quantifiably measure the success of your efforts and make decisions about future funding of BIM-related strategies. So, you know, question for Peter, when you guys were getting started with your BIM strategy, what were you really hoping to achieve by providing BIM content when you were getting started in terms of the way you work with your clients?
It's a good question, Luke. You know, we, I think, recognize the fact that the kind of projects we work on are very often large and complex and expensive and that sort of thing, and they're often designed by the most sophisticated and largest design firms in using the latest and greatest tools and technologies. And what we recognized was that's Rivet, and if we're not offering Rivet families for our products, then those big, large, sophisticated projects, which we really specialize in, are going to bypass us. So I had a lucky view of the industry because I am a former Autodesk employee, and I had a chance. I was with the company when Rivet was acquired, so I saw how that strategy was being applied in the design world, and when I came to Planar, I encouraged them to move forward with this strategy because it made so much sense, and the users of this technology and process were the exact kind of specifiers that we were trying to get in front of. So that's, you know, we weren't so concerned with metrics at that time. We just knew we had to be there.
Right, right. And for Shen, you know, how does well-built BIM content from building product manufacturers actually add value to your project design and construction workflows? You know, is it helping with documentation deliverables, accuracy, simulation? You know, what sort of things do you guys actually specifically see advantage to using manufacturers' content as opposed to, say, generic models or content sourced from elsewhere?
Really what we're seeing is when we're using it for accuracy and for efficiency. If the models provided are well-made models, contain all of the information about the equipment, all the metadata, and is accurate to the shape and size, it saves us time from having to do that. We don't have to modify something we have and, you know, tweak it down and fill in a bunch of data and stuff like that. If it's all there and ready to go, then we have made, you know, our time much quicker, and we've made a product that's more accurate to what is actually being put in and not just a ballpark.
Right, right. So if we're moving forward here, you know, distribution of product data and specification information is a really well-documented industry challenge, and that's not just as it relates to BIM content, but just in communicating product data in general. So if you spread your data distribution out across, you know, lots of platforms, it becomes a real logistical headache to keep everything up to date. Conversely, not having your product data available to designers in the locations they're looking for it means potential lost opportunities. So, you know, Peter, in terms of the way you guys are approaching this, how have Planar distributed their BIM content to date, and how have you managed the really complex challenge of providing updates to your content library when you guys have made changes?
Well, good question. You know, we started early by basically just using the Autodesk Seek service, and we hosted them there. We hired a third party to develop our BIM content, and that we were introduced to them by Autodesk, so we felt that was reliable. And then we hosted those families on our own website as well, on the various product pages, and we experimented with the 3D warehouse, and then Seek became BIM Object, and those are all different approaches. We want them in as many places as possible, but obviously we want to really be where the biggest potential partners are. And the updating has been a challenge. You know, like a lot of publicly traded firms, we do things on annual budgets, and so we have a fixed budget for a whole ton of different marketing activities, including our BIM strategy. And so we have a sort of a fixed amount, which they don't tend to grow, they tend to shrink. So we have to justify it, and what we've tended to do is spend our money on new products because we create new families of products more often than we modify the products that we have in place already. So our focus has been on new families rather than updating the old families. So that's probably been a weakness. We need to focus more on that and weed out the things that have been discontinued or modified. And that's hard. It's a big monster to undertake, so it's helpful to have a good partner to guide us through that process.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge that most manufacturers are facing, especially if you're working in a sphere where your products that relate to technology that's moving quite quickly, and you're changing your products on a yearly or biannual basis or something. It is a really, really large challenge, especially for companies like yourselves. So, so if we're moving forward again here, assessing quality of BIM content can be a really subjective topic. But there's no question equally that quality is really important to designers when deciding if they're going to actually use content from a manufacturer or not. And also the overall quality of the content in the user's mind is inevitably going to reflect on your brand and your understanding of how you have the ability to meet your customers' needs in this area. You know, BIM content like a company's website or like its catalogs or even like the design of its product is a reflection of its ability to create quality outcomes. So it's a really important thing to get it right. So a question for Sean, you know, for manufacturers who either have content already or those who are about to start creating content, what would your advice be to them in relation to the importance of quality in content and this being a factor in your firm either seeing value in utilizing the content or not?
Quality is key. You know, first impressions are important, and you don't really get an opportunity to make a mistake. If you make a mistake and, you know, it ends up having a change order on a project, then it's huge. Every company now is doing something to create content. There are millions of content providers out there creating content. And so the people who are checking this and improving it for the firm and all that stuff, they have a lot of that to go through, and it's not the funnest job they have, and they have a lot of other things to work on. So if you create something that's not of high quality, and it's easier for them just to blacklist the whole line from a company than it is to say this one thing's wrong. They're just going to be like, nah, I just don't use this company's stuff. They're not up to the quality that we need. So yeah, I mean, it's better to bring it out right than bring it out fast.
That's really good advice. and consistency is king. If you've got some really great quality content and some which maybe isn't so great because it was produced earlier on or by a different provider, or it might have been done in-house, or it's a different level of quality, and you happen to have someone review that file or one of those files, that can have you on a let's call it a bit of a black band list very, very quickly. So it is important to be really consistent with your quality. So analytics attributed to file downloads and page views are really commonplace for most forms of digital marketing. But when it comes to BIM content, downloads are potentially really misleading metric as they don't really tell us the most important information, like, was the content deemed to meet the user's needs, and whether the content was ever utilized for project specification or procurement purposes. So, again, question for Sean here. What's the process in your firm for approving and potentially utilizing content from external sources once it's been downloaded? Because we do see the word, hey, my content was downloaded this many times, but I think manufacturers kind of need to understand that once a piece of content is downloaded, there is actually a process that happens internally within firms after that may mean the content will either be used or never used. So interested to sort of get your thoughts on that.
So there's always going to be the renegade downloaders who are just going to grab whatever they want, throw it into the project, and get yelled at later. Easier to ask forgiveness and permission. So that always happens, but it's, good firms will catch that and kind of smack the guy with the ruler and knock it down. In general, the process is when someone wants to use content, they'll put in, they'll notify one of the content approvers in the firm that they'd like to use it, and we'll go through and check it. We'll make sure that it doesn't have a bunch of imported CAD stuff that's not correct. It doesn't have a bunch of strange data fields that are going to bog down our project. That it's accurate and is modeled in a way that we can use. Just standard, making sure it's using standards for the trade that it's in. I mean, are your fields compliant with BICSI or whatever governing body is mandating your standards. And if it is approved, then it can go into usually an approved library that we have available for all staff to pull from. And the goal in the end is to make it easier for people to follow the rules and break them. So you want to get your stuff approved. You want to get it into that library because that's what we're pushing to try to get people to use that stuff because we know it'll work and it becomes available for them and easy to use.
And then Sean, to add on to that real quick, so once that content gets approved and gets put into that digital library, like how does that, what's the effort to keep that stuff up to date internally? Do you have a specific workflow for that?
In general, it's a little easier for what we're doing because there is such rapid turnaround on a lot of the technology stuff that we're specifying. So someone will put it in, see it doesn't have the proper model number, isn't the proper for the current version, and we'll cycle it out. It kind of almost polices itself in that way. But there, it is, again, easier to kick something out than add something in. So if we see something, we notice it's not up to date, it's not correct, it can get just chucked, and then it won't get put back in until someone needs it and finds it and requests it again. Because again, there's just so much content, and it's such a, it would be a full-time job for half a dozen people to maintain all of the libraries for all of the content that we ever need.
Yeah, it's a pretty monstrous challenge for sure. So I guess if we move sort of on from the, we start to thinking about metrics and what to measure and how as a manufacturer, I guess if we can agree that the primary value and return on investment for manufacturers when it comes to BIM content is specifically from AEC adoption and utilization of the content, not just downloading in the first place, manufacturers really should be looking for metrics and creating benchmarks around these specific things instead of just metrics associated with just what we might say just browsing of the content. We really want to look at adoption and utilization. So, Peter, how have you, to date, been able to gauge the level of success of your strategy? And I guess, how are you planning on doing this going forward?
Well, Luke, you're absolutely right about in the past how the typical metric that was available to us was downloads and typically page views as well. And all we could really look at was the delta over time and to see if people were using more or less of our models and viewing our pages more or less, and that was about the extent of it. And one of the reasons that we steered towards Unify Connect is because we have all this access to much more useful additional data. And we really love to engage. You heard me talk about getting face-to-face in front of specifiers. If we don't know who they are, how can we do that? So the fact that now that we'll be on this platform, we'll be able to do that, or at least answer questions or provide updated files or fill in blanks or whatever there might be. We love the fact that we can sort of track our Rivet families and figure out where they're going and move further down the project life cycle. So that's going to be huge for us, and to be able to report on that kind of thing and to be able to just look up data and to have our information there all the way through too, so they can reach out to us if they need to. That's all huge. So the more metrics we have, the more likely we are to continue doing what we're doing, because every year it gets challenged. Is this really worth it? And they look at our budget and they cut, and then they figure out where is it going to be cut. And if we can't tie our expenditures to revenue, and that's a trick because there are many, many steps between downloading a model and getting a purchase order. In many cases, there are 4 or 5 parties in between, and we can't make that connection. So the further we can go down the project life cycle and track what's happening, the more likely we are to connect it to revenue.
Yeah, great. That's really good insight. Thanks for that. Thanks for that. I'm going to hand back over to Steve now, who's going to talk about some of the content analytics associated with Unify Connect and some other things.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. No, Peter, that's such a big topic. Hey, there's multiple touch points. Multiple things have to happen from the time somebody goes and downloads a spec sheet or a piece of BIM content, puts it into our project, to the time it goes to the contractor. We get past the the gate of procurement or being swapped out, and then they actually procure, and then it gets shipped, and the order gets sent in. I mean, there's a lot of steps, right, that have to happen before that happens, and connecting those dots is challenging. There's no doubt about it. Very, very challenging. But that's the actual ROI. Is, hey, this project was designed with our products, and we ended up getting procured on that. And how do we put those pieces of the puzzle together? So, some of the insights that we're able to derive from content usage and search patterns can really be powerful to our manufacturing customers, and to learn more about their target audience and how their customers are interacting with their products. I had a manufacturer tell us the other day they were studying their inbound web traffic, and they were using different keywords. And this is kind of old school mentality. Well, I guess I say old school, but just looking at search patterns to identify how are people coming to their products from Google. Just simple Google Analytics and identifying search terms. And they thought folks were coming for searching for very, very specific types of items, and then they found out that they were searching very generically and finding their way in, not searching on very specific types of complicated searches. It's very, very simple searches. And they kind of changed their marketing strategy and how their messaging was. And so having insight into this information, it's just more data for us to use, right? It's more information for us to turn into actionable types of action that we can take within our companies. And so, Peter, how do you potentially see some of the information derived from having your content on Connect going to help you with future decision making? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, yeah, I think number one is really about budgeting, because you know, we have this tiny little consulting team, and we rely on this kind of stuff heavily. And the greater, you know, marketing department for the company globally, we're just one line item on their budget, so we have to be able to justify it. So as far as decision making, we need to know where to steer the money. And if the money is in SEO, it's going to go there. If the money is in creating more models or promoting those models, that's a big part of it too. Is yeah, once we're on the platform, great. But we got to let people know we're there too. So there's another campaign behind that. So we have to roll all those things together. So it's really, for us, it's more about how to direct our energy and time and expenditures, and we can use all these analytics to help guide us there.
Absolutely. No, that's great. And as far as those analytics go, tying into the company working on working with your products in a design, tying to, you know, how big is that design, right? How do I quantify that design? Okay, so maybe Sean is using a model of mine in this project, but there's 1,000 of those products in there, right? So trying to quantify the bill of materials in a project is another key aspect, and really helping us, like you said, stay focused as to where do we need to put our effort. Hey, there's a project here with 1 or 2 SKUs. There's a project with 1,000. Let's go focus our efforts on the one that's got a bigger return for our time. So, okay, so we're gonna take a look at Unified Connect. We're gonna dive in here live and take a look at kind of how this system works from a subscription center that the design firms and contractors and building owners have access to in the Unified platform, to how the end consumers, the everyday designer, every engineer and architect, how they consume these products and stick them and insert them directly into their designs. We're going to take a look at some of that and what kind of analytics come out the back end for the manufacturers. So first off, we're going to go into our unified web-based management and analytics toolkit. So this platform, because Unified is cloud-based, we have a full web environment where all the managers like Sean can go in and basically manage their entire unified deployment globally, from the largest international firms down to maybe a 2 or 3 office firm. We have designers all across the globe. We need powerful toolkits to be able to manage them. So we've got a lot in this particular web application, but in this subscription center here, this is where these firms can go and subscribe to third-party content. So we'll see everything from out-of-the-box generic Autodesk sanction content from their out-of-the-box libraries to various manufacturers from all across the globe. Some manufacturers will have designations as to what particular region that they sell and procure these particular products, because that's another challenge we've been hearing from not only the manufacturers but from the design community is a lot of times when we download products, we may not even know which region those product models were developed for. And one of the inherent kind of challenges in Rivet is it'll automatically transfer units. So if I download a metric piece of content and put it into Imperial project, those units show up as Imperial automatically. So sometimes it can be challenging to even know this element was made for this region or that region. So we actually have designators on those types of things so that folks can easily identify it. So a design firm like, or a design technology leader like Sean can come in, look at a company like Planar and Planar here, see some information about this company, have links going back to their website, ways to contact their sales group or marketing groups via email, and then he can decide which user groups he wants to select to subscribe to these libraries. So very often they would come in, like Sean would say, they would vet this content and see how consistent is it, what's the quality in their minds and their perspectives. So they may subscribe to an administration group first, then jump into Rivet and test it. And then once they say, hey, this content is made to high quality, I'm going to go ahead and supply my user groups to access it. The user groups here are their user groups within the system. So they may say, hey, this is a US-only brand, and they may select the US region of users to have access to it, or hey, it's a global brand, we're going to supply access to all of our users across the globe. So lots of different ways that they can configure this that's unique to that particular firm. Now, once those subscriptions are made, the everyday designer, we want to keep them in their design environments. We don't want them spending time going to websites, trying to find content, downloading things that we don't have visibility into as a design firm. So with that subscription system, once it's subscribed to, they will have automatic access to it with their different channels here within Unify. So they can be in their Revit design, they can be working on a mosaic tile panel and need a planar display, and they can search for planar, they can search for video wall, they can search for different types of products, displays, LCDs, LEDs, click on that image, bring that element into their active designs, and then start to design their particular video wall with that system. So it's quick, it's easy, it's always up to date, and that's one of the other key challenges that we had spoke about earlier. How do we know when this stuff's up to date? And so we had a manufacturer tell me the other day, he was kind of pretty proud that they moved to kind of a digital way, and they're now distributing content. And I asked him, well, how are you guys doing that? And he goes, well, before all we did was we would just go into offices and we would put our 3-ring binders and update those on a monthly basis with our customers. And now we go in and we give them a USB drive with all of our digital content on there. I go, so what happens when you leave the building? That thing's outdated the same way that your 3-ring binders and specifications were, right? So yes, you went digital, but you still are kind of siloing data and not able to keep these things connected. So one of the wonderful things about Unify Connect is as soon as an element's brought in, like I just did here, we know what revision of that particular element was brought in, by who brought it into that project, and what project they put it into. So as the design firm comes back into their event stream and their project center and they start reviewing their projects, they can very easily see when elements need to be updated because they've been revisioned from their source, whether that's Planar that made a change to that product and updated SKUs or updated specification data. In technology, these things update very, very quickly. Products move quickly, so there's going to be a lot of changes, and we can now connect those dots to make sure that Sean's team has the ability to very easily see what products are out of date in what active designs. So this should hopefully keep things up to date. So keep them up to date digitally before we do our submissions, so they do not become change orders and RFIs, and we kind of reduce that waste in the industry, and that just ends up being more money the owner's spending and more time added to the project. So we want to reduce that waste in the industry, not add to it. So we hope this system does a lot of that as well. Okay, so let's move on. So with this new delivery approach, the always connected nature and the ability to deliver unique experiences to design content consumers on Unify Connect, Sean, how do you see Connect improving the way you source and manage content acquired from manufacturers? And does the model of channel subscriptions, does it start to solve some of our challenges in working with manufacturing content, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, this does a number of things for us. From the traditional method, the stuff we've been going through before, it makes it easier for me to distribute approved content to the whole company. So instead of someone downloading it all from the website or from a Seek thing and trying to get all the content and then checking some of it to make sure it's good and then adding it to the library, letting that library propagate to all the offices, I could, with a few clicks, click a button and make sure everyone in the office has access to that. The ease of it also sort of is adjusting how we approach some of our workflows. Traditionally, we only use manufacturer content when it fits a specific need, when we need to be super accurate in a space, because our workflows and our systems are set up with in specific ways to meet our demands. But in the current day Rivet environment, almost every office is doing some sort of automation. You used to need a programmer to go through and automate your processes, but with Dynamo and just the availability of ease of automation tools, all the offices are doing it. So instead of me trying to push everything into our content that I know is correct, making workflows to take manufacturer content and make it work with our workflows just opens it up and makes it so much easier to say, this is the accurate stuff from the manufacturer. I can put that in, I can hit a few buttons, and it now conforms to our standards and meets our needs for Rivet. And I have the actual manufacturer stuff with all of that data in there that I'm not typing in later. It's all available in there, and I can use it in my workflows.
And that speed is key, right? We got to be efficient as design teams. We never have enough time to kind of make our designs what we want. So we're always under the gun to get submissions out. And talk a little bit about, so with that automation, you're absolutely right. We see almost every design firm doing automation. If Dynamo was around, 8-9 years ago, I probably would have never taught myself how to program, right? Because that automation, visual programmers are so easy to use nowadays. Anyone can automate. Talk about, what are you automating as far as content goes? Is it the data within the content? What really is some of the automation things that are important to you?
So there's two main fields of we're using in regards to the content, the data being the big one. We want to be able to get that data, format it in such a way that it can all talk together among, we may be specifying Planar for a bunch of our displays, but in a large building, we're going to have thousands of displays, and some of them just are going to be from different manufacturers because they're going to need to serve different needs. So being able to get all of that data to be, unified in such a way that it can all work together. So coming from different manufacturers, but formatting it and pushing it in such a way that we can see it and schedule it and get accurate information is important. And pushing, so the other one is like sort of pushing relational data. So we know we have a display here, so we need hookups for it. So where are they? And having and sort of driving the location of those objects based on locations of other objects. So sort of manipulating things in relation to each other, but it really just comes back to getting stuff in as efficient as possible and being able to work with it in a way that's universal.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And I'm seeing, and I don't know if you agree, if you're seeing this as well, but what I see in the industry right now is, 5 to 7 years ago, what we were asking for manufacturers was very simply just give us the geometry, we'll fill in the data ourselves, or maybe give us a little bit of light data. Now it seems like we're doing more with our models. We're doing analysis with our models. We're really looking for more information out of the models, and the owners are too, right? Several years ago, owners were saying, hey, we want BIM, we want a BIM deliverable. We don't really know exactly how to clarify that. BIM execution plans have become much, much more robust, and more owners are becoming more savvy in what data they want to actually use down the road. So are you also seeing an increase in the data you have to supply to the end customer and just in the industry in general, and how much they're leveraging that data downstream for the final stakeholder?
Yeah, absolutely. We've gotten a number of requests requiring extensive data in the families within the models, partly because they want to make sure that they want to be able to do their own quality checks, and to a degree they want to start to push some of this into their FM systems, so they want that data there. We also see it from sort of our end, where we want to be able to build some logic into our designs and our systems. If we know how many data ports something needs, we can then start tying all of that back in and through automation say, well, I know that this IDF closet needs to have 300 ports available because I have 300 ports needed within this floor of the building.
Yeah, that analysis, right? Driving better design through data. Data-driven design is a very common term in the industry, and we're starting to see more and more people pushing that envelope, pushing that forward, which is really exciting to me. So while we've been really discussing Revit-centric BIM content, many design firms use various tools to facilitate their projects. So I'm very happy to announce that Unify will be releasing a new major release with the capability of several more design applications and further extending the reach and value of the Unified platform to customers globally. So be on the lookout for more news on that in the very near future. And to Sean's point, data comes in all different forms, right? So we need to be able to help facilitate and manage that data. Unify is a wonderful platform for data and content on design content, and we're looking to further extend those capabilities. Okay, so we're going to now open it up to Q&A. Please go ahead and feel free to submit your questions. We're going to try to answer all the questions, or as many questions as we can. And so let's take a look at, we've got a question here from Eric. What type of data is important for acoustic products? In our case, floor and ceiling isolators. Sean, you want to take that one?
That's an interesting question. Unfortunately, Rivet has yanked all of its acoustic analysis tools, so there's not a whole lot that we're pulling out of it. Actually, for our acoustic discipline, they don't do anything in Rivet because it can't handle what they need to do. So for acoustic products that we do put in there, usually we're just looking at the standard. It just needs to have the standard data that we need, so the reverberance, the acoustic absorption, all that kind of stuff. So it's actually, we're not looking for super robust stuff with that, just because Rivet can't do the analysis, so we're doing the analysis elsewhere, and that's where we're providing reports from.
And in addition to that, you always obviously want to have links back to the manufacturer's product page to get the rest of the data, to plug that into whatever third-party analysis tool that you're using, to run your different acoustical engineering testing on. Very similar to that in the past, where we were doing CFD analysis in the HVAC world on our models, we were having to rebuild a lot of that geometry over and over. So just having that geometry come automated into and importing and exporting that data from a model, Revit model directly into an analysis tool saves a lot of time there as well, even though we would plug in some additional pattern throws and additional data once we got into the actual analysis environment. So we've got another question here. Let's say, so how does a company get started? While we haven't started our BIM strategy, does Unify assist and provide services? Certainly, yes, we definitely do. And there's a lot that goes into helping a manufacturer with a BIM strategy. Really, first and foremost, we start off very simply by understanding where do you go to market, what regions do you sell, how many brands do you have, are you a global firm or not? And we try to just understand you guys as a manufacturer and what your goals are as a business. Where are your growth sectors focused on? Who are your primary competitors? So very much a BIM strategy is very much a product marketing strategy, and they're very closely coupled. We use technology to help you reach your customers and win more business. And obviously design technologies is a big part of that, but that's not the only part. So really just starts with a simple meeting and a consulting session and really learning from you guys first and foremost some of the things we talked about. So we'll definitely connect with you after the webinar today and try to start that. But feel free, anybody on the call who wants to reach out to us and have make that connection and start that strategy discussion, please reach out to us at sales@unifylabs.com. We'll be more than happy to talk to you and help guide you along the way. And okay, so let's see, we got some more questions coming in here. This one's a good one for Peter. So aside from increased specification volumes, what other benefits or results have you experienced through being able to offer BIM content? Better procurement or quality of designs? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is that the architects and other designers that we work with have they love to use our Revit families because it does help with their selling process. They're often competing for design work, or they're often trying to, please their client with something revolutionary. Everybody wants to do something nobody's done before, and they're able to use those Revit families to show off something amazing and create that wow factor that a lot of our clients want. So it lets us help our specifier partners sell their services and achieve things that nobody else is doing and stand out. And then also one of the things it's done for us is that when we know who is using our models and we work with them to get their on the design phase, in many cases, we don't sell anything direct to the market. We go through AV integrators, so the integration firms are systems integrators. And in many cases, we can guide our architectural partners or consultants to a good AV integration partner so that we can make sure that quality goes all the way through from the design through to the actual installation and completion of the project. So we get a better result when we know who's doing every step of the process because they use the same data, the same model, and the same approach. And then in the end, it's a skilled and certified installer and service company. So that continuity of data and information and relationships is really important, and this helps that process a lot.
That's great. Thanks for that, Peter. Let's see, we got a couple more questions. We're going to take just a few more, and then we're going to look to wrap things up here. So, Sean, here's another question for you. Okay, so what are the most common things you need to update when adapting a manufacturer content library or putting it into a project? I think we kind of touched around the data, but go ahead.
Yeah, and again, usually it is the data. In general, we try to streamline the process, so there are parameters that we need in that data, in those families, but we can get around some of that by putting them as project parameters, so as soon as we load that thing, it's in there, and we can push the actual data to it. So we need to put parameters in there, we need to get the fields in there, and in general, we don't want to have to do any more than that. We don't want to have to edit the geometry in any way. Once I have to edit your geometry, then I have my own generics. I'm going to use my generics because I know they work. I'm not going to try to figure out your scheme for how you're manipulating this piece of geometry through 300 dimension parameters. I'm just going to not use it.
Yeah, a lot of people don't understand the effort, and I like to describe the effort on percentages. I would say 75% of the effort in creating BIM content is in the geometry modeling. It really is the more complex piece of the puzzle, whereas the data is pretty easy to swap in and out. And like Sean had said, the first thing they'll do is download content and modify the data within, and because that's quick and easy, as soon as you touch that geometry, I'm out of here, right? I've got better things to do. Don't have time to try to reverse engineer how you built that content. It's so unique in how folks do it. It can be a real time sink. So, yeah, that's great, and that's something where, in addition to not modifying the geometry, how can, what is the placement options of that content within the model, right? Like we saw in some of the Planar content, being able to just really simply, the way these things work with a simple click, download, and then placement, do they place accurately and properly, on different design surfaces? Is it really, really easy to do? Those are very important, right? We don't have to mess around and try to modify the placement of those elements either. That can be really, really time intensive. So. Oh
yeah, and understanding how Rivet handles that. So, for example, for us, we're a consultant. We have our own model. And we can't modify the architect's model. So if you have a wall-mounted piece of equipment, wall-hosted piece of equipment, I can't host that because I don't own that wall. So just understanding the nuances of Rivet and how it handles those things. And also, we're going to be tagging how high something is. So is your placement point on a wall what you would tag it for the AFF height board,
Right.
And I think just to add to that.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Just to add to that, I think for manufacturers, one of the really important things for them to understand with Revit content is you're not actually just building 3D models. What you're actually building is the building blocks that produces all the different kinds of documentation outputs that the architects and engineers and contractors are trying to produce as part of their project deliverables. So how those models look in different types of views and plans and elevations and sections and different view scales. So you're actually building documentation building blocks as opposed to, you know, what they might be used to previously, which is just CAD models. You're really producing things to produce documentation. So there's a lot of understanding to know how Rivet works and what documentation needs to be produced from them.
Yeah, there's so many different examples. One of the other things I just see in my HVAC career days, pumps in general, like we do so much more with piping and pumps. A lot of pump models I would get would have the piping connections right on the end of the flange. That's not reality, right? That pipe is actually going to be, you know, threaded in, or it's going to be glued in or into the flange itself, so it's subset. And what's funny is, you know, you see these types of things, and they're little, right? They're little mistakes, little nuances. You know, maybe it's a ½ inch off on the length of that pipe. Well, guess what people are doing in Revit now? They're doing pipe spooling drawings and extracting that piping exact length, sending that to fabrication, and they're fabricating off these models. So, you know, accuracy is super, super important when it comes to the geometry and the data as well. And so these are the little things where context makes a huge difference in having your BIM content created, because you understand how people are leveraging it and what they really need to do their jobs efficiently. And so that's a big piece of it as well. Okay, we're going to ask one more question here. This one is for Sean as well. And so what are the potential risks of working with manufacturing content, and what are you doing to negate those?
So the risks are potentially huge. I mean, if we blindly go in and start using manufacturer content and it's inaccurate, and we issue documents with this inaccurate information, it could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in change orders to adjust it. So, you know, we want to make sure that what we're sending out is good quality and accurate. So, you know, we check stuff. We try to make sure that what we're seeing is matching what we're specifying, and you know, we will err on the side of caution. So if we see something that's sort of iffy, it's easier just to get rid of it than to have to worry about it later. We'll use the content we know works as opposed to what might be, you know, what might save time but might not be accurate.
And that's one thing on top of that is getting feedback from the community is another nice metric. And in Connect, the community, like Sean and his design teams, have the ability to 5-star rate and rank this content. So as this content quality is, while it's subjective, it can be quantified here and really shown to the end users, which can be a great measurement back to the manufacturers too. If you're getting a lot of 1 stars a week after you just launched on Connect, we need to have a conversation about, you know, dissecting your content, probably getting that quality updated. It's a good feedback measurement directly from your customers, non-vetted. So we want to make sure that that information is flowing back to you, and you are able to then hopefully create better content in the content that your customers really want to use. So with that, we're gonna move to wrap. I just really want to thank everyone for joining us today. We had a tremendous turnout. I want to thank our amazing panelists who have graciously provided us with their expertise and guidance. Sean, Peter, Luke, thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining me today. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Thanks very much.